Hallelujah. Praise the name of Yahweh, you who serve Yahweh, praise him. Serving in the house of Yahweh, in the courts of the house of our God. Praise Yahweh, for Yahweh is good. Make music for his name, it brings joy, for Yahweh has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel as his own possession. For I know that Yahweh is great. Our Lord is above all gods. Yahweh does whatever he pleases, in heaven, on earth, in the waters, and in all the depths. He summons up clouds from the borders of the earth, sends rain with lightning flashes, and brings the wind out of his storehouses. He struck the firstborn in Egypt, man and beast alike. He sent signs and wonders into the heart of Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his officials. He struck down many nations. He slaughtered mighty kings. Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan. He gave their light as birth. He gave their land as a birthright to his people Israel. Yahweh, your name endures forever. Yahweh, your memory is fresh from age to age. For Yahweh vindicates his people, feels compassion for his servants. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, made by human hands. These have mouths, but say nothing, have eyes, but see nothing, have ears, but hear nothing, and they have no breath in their mouths. Their makers will end up like them, everyone who relies on them. House of Israel, bless Yahweh. House of Aaron, bless Yahweh. House of Levi, bless Yahweh. You who fear Yahweh, bless Yahweh. Blessed be Yahweh from Zion, he who dwells in Jerusalem. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night from a very, very cold room. I hope you're all well. I'm just going to do the normal thing today. Just a couple of notices. I just want to say again a thank you for everyone who is supporting and helping in different ways. The people who post stuff up in the chat, the people who just sort of watch over the chat, people who have helped in sort of running the channel and have supported me in various and different ways. You know, the computer was donated, earphones donated, and the number of people who have stood with me either through long-term and regular donations. I'm about 1/3 of the way, 1/3 of the way there now to being full-time. So I want to thank you for standing with me faithfully over the months, those of you that have committed to doing so. I also want to thank everyone who's donated one-off donations here and there. Thank you so much for your kindness and for your support. So today we're going to do radical questions, just like we've done in the past. But before we do that, as a way of getting the brain juices moving, and also as a way of just allowing more people to tag in before we start, I'm going to give a quick talk on modernity and the church. But for you that are here from the beginning, just remind guys what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing radical questions. It's not the normal Q&A. It's going to be radical questions. So I'll pick some topics and then we'll talk about them. I got pulled up about my slurping my tea. I should just say that the reason why I do that is because I like my tea to be red hot, which means you drink it in cautiously as opposed to just taking it all in. But anyway, let's just talk about modernity. What is modernity? I suppose modernity can be summarized as rationalization. However, it has its origins. It has some of its antecedents back in the Renaissance, and it has some of a lot of its antecedents in the Christian Civil War that we call the Reformation Wars, and the movement of the Reformation. So, for instance, at the Reformation, within certain parts of the Reformation, you had a spiritual development of individual spirituality, this idea that each person needs to adopt the faith consciously on their own, which came from the Baptists, the Anabaptists, this idea of only baptizing adult believers, which disconnected, and it was an idea that caught on, which disconnected this idea that you could be saved because your parents were saved, because your village was saved, because you all had a communal faith together. And also, it had antecedents in the Renaissance, which put new perspective and new light on the idea of man and the individual, which progressed in Protestant thinking, particularly with regards to the idea of the rise of individual spirituality, which was facilitated through technological advancement and the idea of sola scriptura. Even though the magisterial reformers would never have envisioned a sort of hyper-individualized spirituality like some express it today. The Reformation also saw the end of political Christianity, the end of a political vision for society rooted in a Christian paradigm. And the Reformation wars led to society looking for a way to organize society and truth that sidestepped the question that had just led to millions of deaths in this spiritual civil war. And the place that we landed on culturally was the use of reason. Now, reason had always been used through the Christian period. It was never that we discovered reason. It's just that reason became used in a different way. Whereas before, a person would reason from and to revelation, now reason was reasoning from the individual to the world around. And this laid in motion a movement that not only sought to reorganize society, but also started using this methodology of truth onto more and more questions, looking for the reasonable answer, the reasoned answer. And this obviously gave a new value, a greater value, based upon reasoned empirical evidence and reasoned empirical truths, which obviously starts to emerge into the scientific revolution. And it also resulted in a rationalization of the state, which gave no preference or support to the idea of a particular religion. And then as more and more questions started to be asked, they started to come back with certain answers. And so you ended up with the sort of scientific revolution. Particularly one of the touchstones of that was the theory of evolution. The Industrial Revolution, which was a reorganization of economy, the French Revolution, which was a reorganization of the state, and then you had the sort of other kinds of revolutions started to emerge. So you had the sort of interaction with these early Enlightenment ideas with other kinds of Enlightenment ideas like Marxism and fascism and Nazism. So modernity emerges essentially from the cultural trauma of the civil war of the Reformation. And it was a way to try and sidestep the question of religion, which is why in the modern world there is this prejudice against Christianity that doesn't seem to apply to other religions, and B, why our society is so determined to try and structure everything that it does in the absence of any submission to religious authority. So it was deemed that religion became something. It started to be this thing that religion became something increasingly more private, more individual, something separated from politics, something separated from the state, and something that was more opinion rather than authority. Sorry, guys, if I'm not welcoming you. I do apologize if I'm not returning your salutations. But I just want to sort of get this thought out. So then, we kind of, this is a very loose blueprint. You end up in a world where you've got this hyper individualized society that we live in today, to the point that you can determine your own gender just by a choice. And trust me, that's only the thin end of the wedge. There's a logic there that can't be restrained. If I can choose my own gender, why can't I choose my own ethnicity? Why can't I choose a number of other things by choice? And the question is, therefore, what should the church do about that? Well, the thing that the church has to do in response to this is that it has to double down on its identity as Christians. That is the reason why religion has held on, despite the fact that it's had 300 years of this scouring criticism from individualized rationalism. And another expression of this rationalization was this development of a new ethic, the humanitarian ethic, as a way of replacing morality or building morality on humanist lines. And so we had a number of reasoned, rationalized moral ethics, one of the most diverse aspects of the modernist project, because you have so many and so many conflicting and contrasting. But the reason why rationalization did not succeed in eliminating religion, as some suppose that it would, is that reason and the ideology of reason doesn't speak to every aspect of human nature, and it doesn't, and it can't provide value. It can't justify value, and it can't justify meaning, and it can't justify morality. And so what it does is it removes the common cultural aspects that gave modernity removes the common cultural aspects that gave society a common sense of meaning and purpose, and that became sidelined to a private enterprise, which is why you end up with things like goths and emos and all these people so desperate to try and present themselves as something unique, because they're not receiving an identity from the surrounding culture. And so what they're doing is they're imbibing an identity from consumerism and trying to define identity by outward consumerist practices. So the response that the church needs to give to this is to double down on the fact that we have an identity in Christ, that is who we are. We are a people, the Jesus movement, the Christian people, the church, and that we have a history, and that we have values, and that we have doctrines, and that we have, and what we need to do as Christians is to reconnect the Christian faith to the project of civilizational building. Now, this is one of the reasons why Calvinism and its ilk will always and forever be only ever a sideline show in the great the great project of civilization, because they refuse to accept that you can build a civilization on Christian doctrine and values. Now, I want to be clear. There's nothing prescriptive in the Christian faith or in any faith, including Islam. The burqa's not prescribed in Islam, neither is the niqab. There's nothing prescriptive in the Christian faith about what a Christian civilization should look like. What a Christian civilization looks like is dependent on how we work out the matrix between our doctrines and our values, and how much we borrow from or do not borrow from, or contrast ourselves to or copy our history as Christians. But there's nothing sinful or wrong with building a Christian civilization. There's nothing wrong with the idea of building a Christian politique or a Christian polity. And this is what we need to do, because this is the sickness of modernity. This is the illness of modernity. This is the kinds of questions that modernity is just not speaking into, and it's something that we should speak into. So, guys, that was to get us, just to give people time to tune in and to give some people things to listen to whilst you talk about yourself. I hope you're all well. Peace and greetings to everyone who came in while I was talking away. What we're going to be doing today is radical questions. So I'm going to frame a question, put it to us, and then I'm going to invite people to come in and to talk about it. And we'll do that until I get tired, bored, or stop. I want to insist that you do speak on the topic. If you try to change the topic, you know, I will eventually end up removing you. I would ask you, bear in mind, this isn't just a general question. So if I invite you in to the studio and I am putting on, you know, a particular topic and you want to start talking about something else, then, you know, this is not for you. So the first topic that I want to talk about before I release the link for you guys to jump in is this idea that Christians should be involved in the anti-jihad movement. Now, what do I mean with the anti-jihad movement? So the anti-jihad movement is a movement of people of different political persuasions, mainly on the right spectrum of politics, but not exclusively. There are left-wing political types in the anti and centrist in the anti-jihad movement, but it's people who are pushing back against Islamization. So Islamization is the process by which aspects of economy, society, or politics begin to affix themselves to Islamic discourse and an Islamic narrative, and form themselves on the basis of that. And we call this Islamization. In the same way that we could talk about secularization as being the discourse, by being the process by which economy, politics, or culture or society affixes itself to the ideology of reason and the humanitarian ethic as a way of organizing itself as the organizing principle. So Islamization is that same process, but rather than being upon reason or the humanitarian ethic as the governing principle, Islam becomes the governing principle. And it expresses itself, Islamization, in various different ways, of which actual physical fighting is one part. But things like Islamic banking systems, or changes to the law to accommodate Islam, or, you know, force feeding halal food in hospitals and schools, these can all be described as Islamization. And there are people pushing back against that. There are people who are pushing against that, pushing back against that, you know, in politics, in economics, in culture, in all different kinds of ways. You know, in places like in the Philippines, because of the violence that's being used to Islamize, the Filipino Christians are having to use violence to push back against the Islamization, as they did in South Sudan. You know, so it covers the complete spectrum of the use of power, authority, and influence, which is politics, which is conspicuously at play. And I would argue that Christians should be involved in the anti-jihad movement. Why? Because Islam is a religion that teaches that Christians should be second-class citizens. because Islam teaches laws that would be instituted that would restrict the practice of the Christian faith, both historically and in doctrine. One such example being the apostasy laws, of which certain hate preachers are very proud of that. And yet the liberal secular progressives are consistently blind to tackling these hate preachers. So this is why we as Christians need to be proactive in the anti-jihad movement, because if Islamization occurs to the nth degree, then it will lead to the direct discrimination and persecution of Christian communities wherever Islam dominates. For example, the Coptic Church of Egypt. For example, the northern part of Ethiopia and those parts bordering Somalia. For example, northern Nigeria. For example, the southern parts of the Philippines. And these are just the ones where, Christians either make up a majority or a significant part of the population. But where Islam dominates, the church is persecuted. And so we as Christians have a moral obligation to oppose Islam for the good of the church. And that's before I bring in arguments about what Islam does to an entire society and how it might affect other people. And which only adds to the reasons why we should join in the anti-jihad movement. The result of doing so is that you're going to be misunderstood, you're going to be accused of being a racist, you're going to be accused of being a xenophobe. The cure to all of those insults is knowledge, is history. Particularly history is your friend, and the knowledge of how Christians are suffering under Islam and have suffered under Islam for 1400 years. So, guys, that is the thesis. That is the radical question. You're invited to come on either to support the thesis or to come against the thesis, to ask a question of the thesis, or to present an argument for it or against it. The chat is open to everyone, so it's not just Christians that will be coming in to talk about it, it's everyone else. So please come and jump in, and we'll take it from there. So I'll give you guys time to come in. And I just want to sort of advance my argument a little bit more. In 1400 years of Islamization and Islamic societies, we have not yet been able to point to a single Islamic society in which Christians are not being persecuted. But the political elites, that village of idiots, the village people that rule in the West, they are not interested in the truths of history. They've forgotten history. That's another aspect of rationalization. The idea is that you don't use history as a reference point for your decisions, or at least they cut off their history at the birth of the Enlightenment, as you saw at the Olympic Games in the UK, when anyone would have thought that, the history of the British Isles went back to the 1700s and didn't go any further back. They don't look beyond or earlier than that, and they don't actually look outside of the Anglosphere for their references, for their historical reference points. And so the liberal moderns, the progressives, they fail to embrace history as part of their matrix of thinking, which is why they are so blind to the fact that jihadist attacks, these Muslim rape gangs are all actually coming out of a milieu of hatred. They've got this ideological blind spot, and we have to point out to them this ideological blind spot. So I'm just waiting for anyone who wants to jump in. If you don't want to jump in, I will assume that no one's got anything to say on it, and I will just move on to the next topic. But I'll keep waiting for a bit. So in terms of how Christians should be involved in the anti-jihad movement. Well, it goes back to the same ways that we've got to be involved in society. We've got to be involved in society in terms of in terms of its politics, in terms of its economy, in terms of its culture, and that includes the arts particularly, in terms of its what else am I thinking? Knowledge sharing, so that's things to do with education, to do with schools, guys. So and that means that we've got to have a vision of what politics look like and an identity. We've got to be a visible consumer, a visible body of people within that society, so that people will so that the politics and the economics will bend around us in the same way that it bends around other groups like environmentalists, vegans, Muslims. All of these groups have influence in our society because they are visible consumers. We need to become visible consumers, and that means that we have to build our identity. We've got to do the Benedict option via the Antioch community option. Antioch community being a group in Acton that I found as a good halfway measure between Sunday Club Church and Sunday Club Church and Acton. So guys, I have put the link in the stream. If you've got something to ask or something to say, you need to click on the link. You need to come on. I'm not doing questions and answers in the normal way. I can see some people are trying to ask me questions. You need to click on the link. You need to click on the link, enter the studio, ask your question, make your comment for or against the thesis. There you go. You don't have to put your picture up on front. One of the reasons why I'm going full time on this is so I can be the front man for all of you guys that don't. If I can go full time, then I can push into the public sphere the debate points and the questions and the discussion that many of you would lose your jobs for. That's how this whole pyramid works in terms of you need people at the back to support the soldier at the front, kind of thing. So, guys, I'm going to assume, therefore, that none of you have got anything to say on this, that you are all either in agreement or disagreement. I am not sure. I'll give it a few more minutes. There we go. Let's have. He's just got in. Someone's coming in who's connecting. So I'll put the link out again. We're doing radical questions, so we're discussing specific topics. We're not doing just general question and answer, but that didn't work. Let's have a look. Now the thing is, in terms of that there is this mantra amongst Christians. I'll just let in Brother Jeremy. There we go. How are we doing, guys? Mantra amongst Christians. I'll just let in. So, Light of Christ, what have you got to say, bro?
Hi, brother.
Peace with you, bro.
I'm ex-Muslim and I'm calling from Morocco.
Thanks be to God, and it's a blessing to have you on, bro.
It's a blessing to.
What would you like to say?
I was just want to ask you. It's like here in Morocco, it's an Islamic country, and as a Christian, we don't have right to have churches.
Yeah.
They don't allow us. You know that.
Yes, I'm aware.
So my question for the churches in the West, why they don't speak about it? Why they don't talk about it? Sometimes I doubt, even if some of them, they pray for us, even. And we are not like just 100, we are thousands now. There are thousands of of Moroccans that coming to Christ,
Mm.
and that we still they don't speak about it. They don't, and I wish that the churches, like you said, they start like doing this anti-jihad and educate people what is Islam about.
Okay, so brother, let me just reply to that. And I did forget to say that what we're doing is one comment, one question, and then I'll reply. And then what I'll do is I'll ask you to go to the back of the queue to let other people in if a queue develops. There isn't one at the moment, but when there is, I'll take
Okay.
you out of the chat so that you can go to the back of the queue so someone else can come in. But you're absolutely right. Firstly, I want to say that there are lots of Christians that are involved in the anti-jihad movement, and there are lots of Christians who do advocate and speak up for persecuted Christians. So don't think every Christian in the West is lazy. But you're absolutely right to point out the fact that the institutional churches are cowardly about this topic, completely cowardly. And that cowardice is the fault of the Western Christians, that we accept cowardly leaders, that we accept cowardly bishops to managers and to directors, and we don't challenge them on their cowardice. The very discrimination that you've highlighted, the fact that Moroccan Christians can't form their own institutional churches, is a demonstration of the need for Christian solidarity and the need to put pressure on countries like Morocco to grant brothers like yourself and sisters in your country freedom of religion, to gather, to worship, to practice your faith without hinderment. And it is a sign of cowardice by many that they don't allow the that kind of that they don't, they're not advocating or speaking up for or standing for you. And this is exactly why this conversation needs to happen. This is exactly why this discussion needs to happen. It's not happening in the fellowships because the fellowships are Sunday clubs that are about a business for the most part, whereas it is happening laterally across fellowships between Christians on a one-to-one. So for instance, at the moment there's 94 people listening to this, but by the end of a week over 1,000 people will have listened to this YouTube and heard what we're talking about. So don't be completely disheartened, brother, but one of the ways that you could help is brothers like you in the occupied lands need to be speaking out to Western Christians directly, challenging them, putting your story into social media so that people can pick it up and can use it to marshal the argument. So if you put up YouTube videos talking about what it's like to be a Christian in Morocco, a Moroccan-born Christian ex-Muslim, and you kept a sort of vlog diary that other people can tap into and then use that as a way of saying, look, this is a real person. It helps us to engage people in the struggle that you face. I'll let you reply to that, and then I'll ask you to go to back of the queue so that Mr. Brown can speak.
Yes, I agree with you. We need to do our part to speak to others. I'm not saying, I'm not complaining about because we trust in God and we know that Jesus has the victory already. And before we become Christians, I believe that most of ex-Muslims before they become Christians, it's like place in Morocco, we know that we will be under the persecution, and we are not afraid of that.
Thanks
You
be to
know,
God.
and we have the knowledge of that, and we are ready, and we trust in God. Uh, I'm not speaking about all, but the most of people, yeah, they know the knowledge that, and we have. We have the trust of God that He will protect us, and if it comes the time that we'll be killed, we will be with God.
Your
So
courage, brother, is inspirational, and I just hope that it emboldens Christians in the West. If we've got a brother here who's willing to die for the faith, how can we shy away from being criticized for the faith? How can we shy away from being criticized for standing up for brothers that are willing to die for Jesus? That's the challenge that is presented before you, brothers and sisters. How can you be silent when we've got a brother here who's willing to die for our Lord, and many of you are not even willing to speak for him? Thank you, brother. I'm just going to let Mr. Brown speak.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, what have you got to say?
Hey, shalom. Salam to everybody.
How are we doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
My question, a little bit controversial. It's about the fallen angels. Am I right in thinking that the angels in heaven committed sin and they also desired whilst in heaven? And when you go to heaven, you won't have those same desires. Is that right in thinking what I'm thinking? That the
Uh,
angels committed sin and had desires?
So, Mr. Brown, you probably came later and maybe missed the introduction. So it's not your fault. I'm not offended. But what we're doing is we're doing particular topics, and we're asking
Okay.
people to stay on topic. So the topic, just in case you missed it, was should Christians be involved in the anti-jihad movement? Which I went on to define and explain. So have you got anything that you'd like to say on that?
I'm not too familiar with the whole anti-jihad movement, and if
Okay.
there is a jihad movement in the Middle East. But I personally think all of that movement that's going on is all politics rather than religion. Because
Well,
religion will teach you to be peaceful and loving towards your neighbor, whether they're Christian, Hindu, whatever.
okay,
But
so we can deal with that. What
yeah.
you've said, because you've tried to suggest that there isn't a jihad movement. But if we look over 1400 years of Islamic expansion, with a few exceptions, like places like Indonesia, Islam has advanced a political rule which has been seen as an integral part of the religion, and that has been done via the sword. Now, that doesn't mean that they go up to people and put a knife to their throat in every village, in every town, in every point in history and go, convert to Islam or die, though that definitely also happened. But Islam saw itself initially as a religion that was going to bring God's law to the world and would do that through the use of armies. And you yourself, Mr. Brown, have used Isaiah 42 as a way of describing Muhammad as one who leads armies to bring the laws of God. So even in your own use of polemics and apologetics, you have described Islam as expanding violently to try and make it fulfill what you thought was a biblical prophecy.
Expand violently.
Violently through the
It
use of
depends.
sword to establish itself in the political and the economic and social arena.
Well, when Moses became a statesman, he had to use violence to establish his religion and expand it. It's the same sort of thing. I just released a video just a few minutes ago where Jay Smith actually clarifies this whole thing, what we're just discussing right now, how when he was in Mecca, there was no need for violence because he was a minority and he was only preaching. It's only when he went to Medina, his authority got bigger and he became a statesman. And when you're a statesman, you have to deal with these sort of state issues, which is war and all the other rest of the issues that come along. And Jay Smith clarifies it very eloquently. If you want to have a look at my latest video, I just posted.
Thanks for the advert, Mr. Brown. I just want
No
to, and at this point, Brother Light of Christ, if you want to jump in and say anything more, feel free. You don't need introduction, just speak. But I just want to point out then that therefore that we have established that Islam does establish itself through violence in the political, in the social, and therefore the question is, should Christians push back against that? And I would say, yes, we should. We absolutely should. And we shouldn't just push back against it here in the UK or in France or in America. We should push it back right into Mecca itself. Until we can build a cathedral in Mecca, we shouldn't stop. when we can build a cathedral in Mecca, then we can say that we've got some kind of reasonable grounds upon which we can discuss tolerance, peace, and getting along with one another. Any thoughts, guys?
I would respectfully disagree, Bob, because in the past 21 years, America and its allies have engaged in 21 wars, but out of which 9 were Muslim countries. And none of those Muslim countries has even declared or engaged in war with America. And it is America and its allies who have engaged and made life misery for millions of people. So yeah, I would say Muslims have to form an alliance to counter this movement that's going on with the West. They don't want to admit the fact that they're Christian, but you know, at the end of the day, all your soldiers that's going there, they're Christians, because when they come back, they get buried under crosses.
Right. So let me reply to that, Mr. Brown, because firstly, America has also bombed the crap out of Christians like they did in Serbia to support Muslim jihadis. And they have also turned a blind eye to acts of Islamic aggression like they are doing with Turkey right now, who has sponsored and supported Islamists in Syria and in Azerbaijan. Furthermore, September the 11th was the sort of kickstart, as it were, to a fight against, bearing in mind that America sponsored and supported jihadists in their fight against the Soviet Union. The Islamist networks existed. The acts of violence predate even America itself. Before the foundation of America, Islam was behaving aggressively towards non-Muslims. And every year of America's existence, there's been elements of the Islamic community acting aggressively against non-Muslims. So the fault lies in the Muslim community, and the bigotry and the prejudice and the discrimination that your religion teaches against other people. And it's whether you subscribe to that is a different question. I'm not saying you do or you don't. I think you might be sympathetic, but I don't think you necessarily fully subscribe to it. But it's this teaching that is the problem, and we need to stop shrinking from calling it out and calling it what it is.
Bob, when the church
if you just let Light of Christ speak, and then you reply, Mr. Brown.
I think Mr. Brown doesn't know the teaching, the heart of the teaching of Islam. Is Muhammad said, "لقد جئتكم بالذبح." I came to you with slaughters. And Muhammad, in his beginning, he starts peaceful, but that's wrong. He wasn't starting peaceful. He was attacking caravans and stealing from caravans. And after, when he get the power, he attacked Mecca, his own people, and he slaughtered people. And after that, and even he paid people to say that they are Muslims, so he can gather a big army. And when he had the power, all his peaceful verses, they were abrogated by the Surah 9. So this teaching is still applying now. Muslims, they still have the same teaching that Muhammad have, that they need to conquer other countries. Now Muslims, they are weak. They are weak if we think about weapons and attacking other people. They can another countries, they cannot do it. So how they do it? They do it with hypocrisy. They go to the West people and say Islam is peaceful. Islam is like that. Islam, we will respect women. We don't kill apostates. Everyone is have freedom in a religion in Islam, and they show you this abrogated verses, and they don't show you the real teaching of killing people, attacking, and conquering. And
Thank you, brother. I just want to let Mr. Brown reply. I want to let Mr. Brown reply to that, and then I want to let Rob speak. So go on, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, well, there's a reason why Christians don't implement the law that is laid out in the Bible. Is because you have a separation from church and state. When the church was in power, you had women being persecuted all over Europe because they looked either prettier or smarter. And when the church was in power, you took back Jerusalem forcefully, which started the crusade in the first place, which was because of Christians. And uh, throughout your whole history, there's been violence, but we don't point out those violence. Yep, we are in an era when the church was in the era of dominating. It produced a lot of violence. We are. You say we are weak now, but look, actually, we're not weak. There's what 3 billion of us. There's close. I don't know how many million there is in the UK, but if we were told to still spread Islam by the sword, we would have conquered Britain, the UK by now already. Because for every corner there's a Muslim owner, right? And we could have conquered you a long time ago, but we haven't,
So
because we're not.
allow me.
It's not like it's not. Just want to finish this little point off, Bob.
Yeah,
It's not
go on.
like we are the way you make it look like we are these violent people, blah blah. Like I just highlighted, in the past 20 years, America has engaged in these wars. Saudi Arabia last year, in 2018, had the biggest arms deal from America to date, and it did not attack any Western countries. Instead, it attacked Syria, it's not Syria, sorry, Yemen and its neighboring countries. So for you
Okay,
to
so
say that
allow
it's a
me.
threat for the West is a big hypocrisy.
Okay, allow me to reply. So, yeah, I think we just need to deal with a couple of things, which is that Christians, any Christian who knows his faith, knows that Christians don't accept a separation between church and politics, but a separation between church and state is something intrinsic to a Christian politique in terms of the institutions. Mr. Brown is so ill-informed. He thinks that the first crusade is what started the Crusades. What started the Crusades was 500 years of Islamic jihad. I might have got my numbers slightly off by a couple of hundred years, but that's what started the first crusade. It was a response to centuries worth of Islamic aggression and invasions of Christian lands. He throws up a complete red herring talking about the treatment of women. I mean, we could talk about the fact that Muhammad says to plow your women like a man plows the field, or that the majority of people in hell are women, or that women are deficient in intellect and therefore you need 2 women for every 1 male witnesses, or the fact that you need 4 witnesses to rape. We really can't take lectures on the treatment of women from someone who's defending Islam. And then also, I want to point out that you're not really addressing the point. The point is, should Christians stand against Islamic aggression, the Islamic jihad, the Islamic idea of Islamization, and simply saying, we haven't conquered you. You couldn't conquer the UK by force, not yet anyway, because to do that, you need to be hitting the percentile between 40 and 50% of the population. That's when mass movements of violence begin, as we're seeing in Nigeria. Until you hit about the 30% mark, 30 to 50, that's when the networks of jihadists that always accompany any Muslim community as a minority reach sufficient numbers to therefore organize as a military movement. Beyond up to 3%, what you have are individualistic acts of terrorism. So you couldn't at this point, because Muslims only equal about 4% of the UK population. But let's see how things turn out in France, where we've already seen Muslim gangs walking the streets with Kalashnikovs. Now, I just want to let Rob speak, and then you come back to you, Mr. Brown.
All right. Hi, Bob.
How
Hope you're having a good Sunday.
Go on, bro. What do you want to say?
So, I just wanted to say, Light of Christ, were you on Sam Shamoun's podcast? His video?
No, I know Sam Shamoun in Pal Talk, but I never have.
Sorry, I thought I recognized your voice.
What do you want to say on the topic, Rob?
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, it's I completely agree that the church should just proclaim, I guess, that we're taking on a moral, spiritual war with the jihadists of Islam, and would invite even people like Mr. Brown to be like, whether you accept it's a reality or not, even on the premise that if we are to live together as Christians, Muslims in the UK, as a nation, as a people, we would be together clearly in proclaiming that on a moral, spiritual basis right now, everyone living in the UK is not at war with Islam. We're not at war with, we're not at war with the Muslims. We're in a war with this jihad that's given permission by Islam, the theocracy, the people. So that's what I want to throw in.
Okay, so let me reply to that, Mr. Brown, and then I'll come back to you. I would say to you, Rob, that we have to be wise in thinking who we're wanting to build alliances with within the Muslim community. Not everyone who says that they are for peace is for peace. Mr. Brown, I know, is sympathetic to Islamist ideology, though he's not an outright Islamist yet himself. He leans that way, and his pretensions of peace are but that, pretensions, so that people like yourself, Rob, will lower your guard. There are obviously genuine reformers within the Muslim community, like who's that guy who appears on LBC radio? What's his name? He used to be an Islamist, and now he's an extreme kind of liberal. But he's the kind of person. That's the one, yes. He's the kind of person that you can build genuine alliances with.
50-50, yeah.
But people, the Speaker's Corner crowd talk peace while desiring domination.
Yeah.
But I would say to you that your concept of the conflict is too narrow. It's not just moral or spiritual. It's also political, economic, cultural. It's an information war, and a number of other different. It's a cultural war. So we can't limit it simply to moral or spiritual questions.
I mean,
let Mr. Brown come back, and then if you want, let Mr. Brown. Let Mr. Brown come back. Just write a note, and then you can come back on something later. Go on, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Little bit of a character assassination there.
I was breaking up there. Could you just repeat the last 5 seconds?
Rob, just to you catch it on the replay, bro, or come back to me when I let you back on and ask me then. I just want to let Mr. Brown speak. Go on, Mr. Brown.
Bob. I was going to say that how you described me was a character assassination. It's not true, and I am for peace, as we all Muslims are. Since we came here, I came here in the 80s, Bob. Yeah, 86. Yeah, since 86, when I came here, I didn't find the peace and love from my fellow Christians. Instead, I found it racism, hatred, and bigotry. It didn't stop, Bob. Yeah, it did not stop. And in the 90s, as you know, when the far right was moving, what were they doing? As we have right now, Britain's first carrying crosses and being racial and bigotry. But with that saying, Bob, when Christians were expanding towards Europe, how did they take that expansion? Did they go with peace or did they go with the sword? But going back to your original topic, Bob, should Christians stop expansion of jihadists? Yeah, if they're violent, Bob, yeah, I'm with you, mate. I'm 100% with you. If they're violent, if they're like anything like ISIS, Al Qaeda, Daesh, any of those guys that Britain and America had funded in the past, yeah, I'm with you, Bob. I want those people to be stopped at their track, because they give every Muslim a bad name, yeah, and they're not for Muslims. If they want to ally themselves with the Bible, with the Quran, and say they're Muslim, they're not. They're killing more Muslims than the Christian West. They have blown up more mosques than the Christian West. They have burnt more Qurans than the Christian West. So, but yeah, Bob, I agree with you. To stop this evil ideology, whether it comes from abroad or home, yeah, I'm with you in that sense. Stop them at their tracks.
Okay, Rob, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I just think that's all way off point. And don't get me wrong, my statement was maybe sounding naive, but that was me just paraphrasing a statement from the church, just as a wholesome, whole, moral, pure virtue. You know, if that came from the community of the church as that sort of statement,
Yeah.
you know, I think it would deserve the kind of nuanced and the picking from the community like you would have, and be like, yes, this is of course our statement, but you know, I don't take Mr. Brown as anything other than someone who's pushing for the aims and ambitions parallel to the Jihad in the UK, right? It's another means, it's another method. As a Christian, I fully go, right, but as a human being, are you promising to act with us as Christians to avoid any possible communications, any grey area where people, just like in the Quran, can use certain positions, certain statements, certain actions to forward their motivations, right? And Mr. Brown, you are very much right in that grey area where you play with that. You know, it's kind of your nuance, it's kind of your ability, which you take. You know, you act as a false friend many times. You two-faced many Christians in the park, and play it almost unconsciously, you know, to the camera. You know, you'll just deny it outright. It's shocking. You know,
I will give Mr. Brown a right to reply. Okay, wait one second.
That's an ad hominem. I know. Sorry, I went into that, but it is just I didn't want to come as some sort of Islamic apologist that he was suddenly using me as, and you know what I mean. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just reply. Light of Christ. Obviously, you want to talk? Just let me know. You know, you're more than welcome to speak. I just want to come back on some of the things that you've said, Rob, and then I want to give Mr. Brown his opportunity. So I think, you know, what you said, Rob, is actually right. If the church did come forward and say, look, we as Christians stand up against Islamization, but we are willing to work with any Muslim who is for the common good, as defined by, you know, Christian ethics and morality, then and made a very clear separation between the sin of Islam and the sinners, of which we are all sinners. But so the sin of Islam and Muslims, where we are for Muslims, but we are against Islam. And if that means that we have to, if there are some Muslims that are so committed to Islamization that we have to stand against them, then we should. But if there are Muslims who want reform, then we are for those people and to build alliances with those people. I think that would be a vast improvement upon the kind of cowardly sopping that we see within the church, particularly, you know, His Holiness the Pope in Rome at the moment. I want to bring onto something that Mr. Brown said, which is about the anti-jihad movement and the right. And I think it's worth saying and being honest that if Christians do get in bed, if the Christians that are involved in the anti-jihad movement, and any Christian who does get involved in the anti-jihad movement, you are climbing into bed with the far right. That is just a fact. But the far right needs to be evangelized. They need Jesus just like everybody else. And actually getting in bed with them, evangelizing them, and seeking to challenge their ethno-nationalist ideology and their racism and their bigotry, and to point out the fact that there are Muslims like we saw last night, Shania, who was against Islamization. When she saw the crime that was committed by ISIS, she recoiled from that, and pointing out the fact that Mr. Brown has a legal right to stay in this country, and we don't have the right legally to remove him under our current laws, and that trying to build an ethno-state is something that is, you know, against the Christian tradition. And challenging them on that front is an antidote to the problem of the far right. And I just want to point out that Christians have died at the hands of the far right as well. Christians have died, black Christians in America have died at the hands of ethno-nationalists. And if we oppose jihadis because they blow up churches, then we should oppose the far right because they go into churches and shoot them up. Mr. Brown, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Bob, seriously, even sorry, Rob, he's left the chat now. But
You
what
might
you're
come back in.
saying, it's a bit hypocritical. If I come with a piece and you're saying it's not a peace, it's false peace, it's got a hidden agenda, how could I make peace with somebody who's always going to be skeptical or paranoid, right? And again, I wanted to highlight, we've been here for such a long time. If we really did want war and create a situation, we would have done what Israel does every year. Yeah. So all your like Tony Blair, I'll give you an example. Before, when he came out of university, he was approached by a Zionist, just like what's his name, your current one, and all of that has been exposed by RT News. Exposed all of that. I've got the title of the program where they exposed how Israel gets all your leaders before one they come out of university and does business with them. So you can't see a single Muslim organization coming to the UK and then influencing your politicians, like how they influenced, what's her name, that Priti Patel. She had a private meeting with Israel. Can you imagine any of our Islamic leaders having private meetings on another country and then coming back home again? And then
Yeah, of
what
course.
kind of criticism will we get?
Okay.
It's a bit hypocritical, Rob. If I come with peace, you have
One
to at
second.
least acknowledge or try to see that if I'm coming with true peace. Because
Okay.
the whole premises of your thing basically is the fact that there was statistics done by like poor institution and many other institutions done statistics all over Europe, all over UK, and all over US, and they come out with a figure and they said by 2050 or 2060. UK would have been Islamicized because people would be converting, not by the sword, but just by willingness. Europe
No,
would have been
Mr. Brown.
converting as well. Yes,
Okay,
I'm showing you facts.
Nonsense.
Poland, look, Poland did not have any Muslims, but they have a minority of Muslims. Just like Jamaica in 2012 only had a couple of hundred Muslims, but
Mr.
now they
Brown.
have thousands.
Mr. Brown.
It's not by
Mr.
the
Brown.
sword.
Mr. Brown.
I'm
Mr. Brown.
sorry, I'm rambling on.
Yeah, no, you're not. Yeah, let's just address this point. We've got to accept the fact that there are people converting to Islam. That is a fact. There's also people converting to Christianity. We've had more converts from Islam in the last 100 years than we have in the last 1400 years. One of the reasons why you've got a movement of conversion to Islam is because it is speaking to people across an entire spectrum. If we want to see more converts to the Christian faith in the West, we have to speak to people across an entire paradigm spectrum, not just you've got to believe in the gospel narrative, of which that is central, it's kernel, it's absolutely core, but we've got to speak to people across the entire spectrum of culture and civilization. We would see more converts from Islam to Christianity if those Muslims lived in free countries. We already know that there's huge numbers of Muslims that don't really like Islam. They just keep up the pretense of Islam because they live in countries where the cost is so dire to denying Islam publicly. Once that power has been stripped away from the Muslims, the core jihadi kind of Islamists, once they can no longer dominate their society and people can make free choices, everybody knows that Islam will collapse. Even Muslims know Islam will collapse. That's why they're frightened to go toe-to-toe with Christians in a free society in the Muslim world. In the West, the predicates of modernity are already prejudiced against Christianity. That's why the liberal elites are blind to the Christophobia that emanates from within too large a section of the Muslim community, but will scream blue murder if you so much as graffiti on a mosque. Rob, as our brother from Morocco, as someone who lives in a Muslim society, what would you like to say?
Well,
and then the last word.
I wish if I know that Mr. Brown, if he read the Quran in Arabic or in English, because we stay in understand the hypocrisy is that's. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, you broke up for a minute. Just start again.
Hello.
Just start again.
I wish I know that Brown, if he read the Quran in Arabic.
Oh,
No,
this is a
sir.
shame. I think.
I've got some of his questions.
Give
Yeah,
him-
I've been
Well, one
taught
second,
part
Mr.
of
Brown.
it
Hold.
by
Pause,
Arabic.
Mr. Brown. Pause, Mr.
Give
Brown.
him a sec.
I want to give him a chance. The light of Christ. Can you hear
know
us?
my internet's been
Okay, I
awful.
think he's having internet problems. It's a shame, really, because I wanted to let him have the
Fair.
final point. Guys, I want to thank you all for your contributions. I'm going to bring this to a close and move on to the
Hello?
next topic. Okay, the light of Christ. We'll try this one last time. You're obviously having internet
Sorry.
problems, but go on. Try to get your point out
Yeah,
as quickly
sorry
as you
for
can.
that.
It's not your fault.
Well, I just want to tell him that his Quran is full of teaching of hate and order of going and killing people. And I think I don't know how he wants people to believe that he is, and peaceful and loving. I don't hate Muslims. I love Muslims, die for a Muslim. Uh, but uh, but I wish that Mr. Brown can tell us what the Quran teaches about how to address infidels, kuffars, the people of the book, with the truths. Don't hide behind this, showing the West that you are a peaceful and a loving person.
Okay. Guys, I want to thank you all for your contribution. If you'd like to remove yourself, please, from the studio, I'm going to wrap this one up and then I'm going to move on to the next topic. So if you could do that
Right.
whilst I'm wrapping up, you're more than welcome to come back in on the next topic if you want to. So in
God
terms
bless you,
of...
brother, bro.
God bless you, bro.
bless
Peace
you.
be with you. And please keep our
Yeah.
brother,
No
the
closing
light of
statements,
Christ, in your prayers. No, I'm asking you to leave,
Okay.
please.
I'm leaving.
Thank you. Just like that,
God
Mr.
bless you,
Brown.
bro.
God bless
God
you.
bless you. Bye.
God bless you. Take care. So, Mr. Brown, are you going, or am I kicking you out? Thank you. So, in terms of this issue, one of the things that we need to recognize is that within Islamic sources, that's the Quran and the Hadith, there is a violent supremacist narrative that you can trace out. You know, the Quran calls Jews and Christians the dumbest of creatures, the worst of creatures. It talks about waging war against the unbeliever until they pay the jizya tax. It talks about killing apostates from Islam. Not every Muslim taps into that narrative. In fact, some Muslims are so kind and generously hearted that they don't even recognize that that is Islam. And the reason why is because they're not familiar with these verses. They're not familiar with these sources, like Shania wasn't when she saw the video of ISIS killing someone. So we have to recognize the fact that, one, not every Muslim taps into that narrative, but two, at any point in time, a Muslim can tap into that narrative. And this is why you have this phenomena of instant radicalization, or radicalization over a short space of time. It's because someone taps into that narrative and then boom, it's there in the mind. And some Muslims are just committed to this narrative, but not necessarily expressing it violently. They want to express it in other spheres, in other ways. And we Christians need to deal with this narrative and accept that it is there, no longer shrink from it, no longer cower from it. We need to remember our history, the history of the church, the occupations of Eastern Europe, the occupations of Armenia and Georgia, the occupation of Egypt, which still goes on, the occupations of Ethiopia, and learn what it means to live by this, to live in this reality. Muslims have been practicing, not all Muslims, I want to stress that. So when I say Muslims, I'm talking specifically of the ones that do it, but there's always been Muslims practicing violent jihad for 1400 years. So pointing to 20 years of violence by the United States, what's 20 years compared to 1400? You do the maths. Okay, guys, so that was that topic. Thank you very much for those that contributed. The next one that I want to talk about, a controversial or a radical question for Christians, is the idea that Christians need to give up on state education. at this moment in time, this is somewhat academic because state education is faltering under the COVID crisis. But state education was born out actually out of church institutions. You know, the church used to be the main provider of education in Western civilization and also in Eastern civilization. But then, because of the process of secularization, the state expanded its role into people's lives by taking over more and more of those self-organized roles of society that groups that smaller societies within the state used to run. So smaller societies within the state used to run schools. The state came along and introduced and took over that role. And when the state was Christian, when the state was ostensibly working to a Christian narrative, that wasn't a problem. State education included an act of worship. It included teachings on the Bible and a genuinely and an education that was peppered with a Christian morality. But now that rationalization and the humanitarian ethic are now dominant within our culture, now that we are in a post-Christian West, what we see is that the state, which is, the controller of education and the education establishments, which are one of the principal means by which information is shared. So that's one of the key battlegrounds that Christians need to be engaged in, is information sharing, which is why I do a YouTube channel. But the school education is one of the principal means by which you pass along information. And unfortunately, because of progressive ideology, education is no longer about simply educating people in knowledge. The state sees its role as educating people in terms of ideology. And this is expressed in the way that it educates around sexuality and in the way that it educates around transgender specifically. These are two ways. There's also others, the way that it teaches science as an atheistic assumption. It would be a third example. And the way that it tries to teach this idea of the humanitarian ethic within our state education system. There are ideas in schools that are not compatible with the Christian worldview. And so, as Christians, because we are not in a position always to send our children to a Christian school, we're not always confident that those institutions that are Christian schools have managed to preserve their Christian ethos. And also because we're not in a position to change the direction that the state is moving in terms of education, that we Christians need to get behind and develop and grow the homeschooling network and start to homeschool our kids. And that might mean, for instance, groups of Christian families sending their children to a particular mother or father within the family, obviously after all those particular checks have been done to, safety and all of that, sending children to home schools within our communities. And this is another reason for the Benedict option and why the church needs the Benedict option. So that's the topic, that's the thesis. We can't overturn the situation that we're in. We've seen attempts, for instance, by the Muslim community, and this demonstrates the strength of the Benedict option. A Muslim community implies a Muslim majority area, and that's why the Benedict option is important. But those Muslims have put pressure on the state with regards to the education of their children around the issue of transgenderism by removing their kids from class. Now, I've not really kept up on that. I don't know where it is now. But they have managed to stand up to the state precisely because they are the dominant demographic in their area, which is why we need the Benedict option. What is your opinions, guys? Should we continue to send our kids to school and say to them, You know, trust your teachers, listen to your teachers, be good at school, be a good student, while our teachers are filling their head with both with knowledge and ideology? Or do we change the narrative that we send our kids to school with and say, listen to them in science and maths and English, but when they start teaching you this topic or this topic or this topic, you don't listen to your teacher, you listen to me, and we teach at home more proactively? Or do we abandon state education completely and set up Christian schools and do education at home in the homeschooling network? Okay, guys, so I'm going to share the link. Feel free to jump in if you have something to say on it. The education system in the UK is not a safe place for Christian kids. And we as Christians need to be thinking about how we preserve our own children and our own worldview in the state. Because the thing is, if we're sending our kids to school year upon year, I'll let you in, Mr. Brown, in a moment. If we send our kids into school year upon year, 5 days a week, where they're receiving one kind of teaching, and the only bit of Christian input that they're getting is maybe at a Sunday school once a week, or if you've got a good Christian parent, a little bit of Christian education at home, there's always this danger that the weak links in the chain lose their children. And this is why, as Christians, we need to do church differently. Okay, Mr. Brown, what have you got to say to that? The question is, I'll remind you, should Christians remove their children from state education?
I'm a bit of a mixed feeling about the whole state education. In the past, I think it was quite good. They did very good, but now it's become more political, and they have their hidden agendas. Now they're teaching young kids about homosexuality, gender fluid, and all this nonsense. None of this is going to benefit them after they leave school. I personally think it's a seed that's been planted in people's head, our children's heads. So when they grow later in life, it's just going to develop that seed. And it's completely nonsense. Yeah, but I think, yeah, I think personally people should think about homeschooling now. Even myself, I'm thinking
Can I
of
just jump in quick?
Rob,
Positive point.
No, Rob, let Mr. Brown finish.
All right, sorry.
And yeah, well, sorry, I just lost my point. But yeah, completely agree with you, Bob. It's 50-50. It really depends on the school itself. Some schools are really good, but some schools, like I read the other day, they took the girl to court because she refused to wear a skirt that goes above her knee. And
yeah,
this is just is bonkers for me. It's really like in Colombia, they introduced I think 2018 they had a whole parade of satanic movement where there were just, and there was children there, you know, and it just it's really is scary. And you know, I think people need to wake up to these sort of things. As we have our differences in religion, but I think we all have this common thing where we want a good thing for our children, a good education, not to be, you know, influenced by these evil ideologies. And yeah, I think we all need to sort of band together on this one as well.
Okay. Rob, what would you like to say?
So yeah, this is where I know, like in the narrative, is, you know, on this side, this human side, out of the politics, out of the mission, you and Mr. Brown always meet, and I think, you know, man to man, ask Mr. Brown, would he like join Christians in the park, you know, really pushing a narrative of anti-Islamic, you know, just remove all of that sort of narrative away, and still there's a huge discussion, interesting discussion to be had between Christianity and Islam. You know, you've got Messianic Jews now. There's all sorts of things going on in this kind of understanding of who God is, what is the way. You know, somebody who's looking to Christianity, you know, I'm there, but I'm not in the church. I'm not in the community. You know, you're sitting there. You go, obviously Christianity 1,000 times over Islam as a way of thinking how the universe works.
So the question is, should Christians remove their children from state education?
Yeah, I think it's quite sort of too big a question in that sense. It's like, yes, and then, but it should be reformed, right? I think as a community, we probably would have for years to come, a government-funded service of school, but maybe it's only like 20%, 30% of the population, people that really do need the state to have it, and it's part of tax from the community, but the rest of it should be, relatively free schools, Christian churches, church schools. Why not?
I'm not quite sure that you've understood the question, to be honest, Rob, because the question is, should Christians remove their children from state education? But let me just come back to something.
That's why I said yes at the start, but then
I mean, this idea of reform, I think is beyond us.
Really?
And 1 second, Rob, please. If you just want to mute your mic, mate. So in terms of Christians reforming, we are spread out like a little bit of salt in too much water, or a little bit of butter over too much bread. There's not a critical mass of Christians condensed into a particular area for us to have much impact. And we're so politically uneducated as a community that we literally fumble around the issue about how to deal with this topic. The Christian setting up alternative Christian schools only works if Christians are willing to work for those institutions. Because if those schools can't get the teachers, because I think the moment you set up an institution, the institution takes on a life of its own and it wants to survive. So if the Christian schools can't get the Christian teachers, it will end up employing non-Christian teachers. And that is how the Catholic school system failed to teach Catholicism or Christianity to its children, because they ended up employing a critical mass of non-Christians in their schools. So I think reform is beyond reach, and I think now we have to reduce it. Except in a few places, we have to reduce it right back to homeschooling. I just want to let in Bloodfire and then Boy Plus. So Bloodfire.
Oh, can you hear me?
Peace be with you, bro. Yeah, peace be with you.
Yeah, peace be with you. I think generally the curriculum in state schools is just it's post enlightenment. It's basically biased towards the evolutionists and their religion. It's not helpful to anybody really, and all it does is support ecumenical ideals between religious faiths, which cannot work if you actually know specific religions like Islam. So in a sense, I don't think in any way that state schools in any way are beneficial to Christians. And I think they only serve to harm the narrative. I think there's certain things like when it comes to let's say like citizenship, for example, the classes I used to have, things like that. They support this very coexist narrative between religions. They view all religions as the same. They don't really specifically cater to one specific religion like they did back in the 1500s or before when the Catholic schools were teaching us stuff. But nowadays, they have sort of a laissez-faire thing with religions, and they don't really view it as paramount, nor do they support it in a way. And if they're going to support one religion, they'll support another on top of it. So the ideals of Islam and stuff, like don't criticize the ideals of Islam, don't criticize the teachings of Muhammad or the teachings of the Quran. Stuff like that is just the basic foundation of like curriculum, and the curriculum is really problematic for people who want to have an ardent religious faith. Unfortunately.
Sure. I think there is that we've reached a point where a way of engaging, a way of interacting with the state is becoming increasingly toxic to our community, and we need to rethink how we engage with the state on these kinds of questions, and upon what lines. And you're absolutely right. It is post-Enlightenment. The Enlightenment used to have a project. The point of the Enlightenment was that through the use of reason and science, we were going to find the answer to all questions. And that project has failed. And now what has emerged out of that is what's left from the Enlightenment, which is this idea of one second, Bloodfire. The idea of individual self-determination, and that is at the heart of the whole transgenderism and the redefining of family, so that a family can be whatever you want it to be. Based upon this idea that we don't want to make anyone feel bad because that harms people's emotions. So it's a very post-Enlightenment sentiment, and false ecumenism is certainly in there. This idea that all religions are equal, that all religions teach the same thing, is something that our children are being taught, and that's not what, as Christians, we can teach our children. And I think that Christians need to be much more aware of the fact of what the state is teaching your kids. Just on that, I want to let Boy Plus come in. What do you want to say, Boy Plus?
Yeah.
I just want to remind you, one second, I want to remind you the question is, should Christians remove their children from state education?
I'm following. So this is the what I had in mind last time we talked about similar issue. We should separate religion from state. I mean, from civil. But you said that
the question is, should Christians remove their children from state education?
No. It will be a kind of segregation. As a Christian, okay. we need everybody, you know, so that our faith will be stronger when we interact with others. My own saying is this: the Christians should engage in state education and create another kind of classes, maybe once a week for their children. I grew up in a community whereby after every Sunday in the evening, we went to Sunday school in the evening. There we get the right information about our faith. But today's is nowhere to be found in Christian communities, you know. So, I mean, it is good we engage, interact with others, and then a way to give our kids the right information they need pertaining their faith as a Christian. And that we create jobs also for our brothers and sisters that are studying religion. And you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Let me reply, Boy Plus, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to everybody to just speak freely, and I'll just manage who says what. Actually, I'll let Paul, who's going to come in shortly, he speak, but not just yet, Paul. I just want to reply to what you said about, you know, the way to do this is have supplementary classes for our kids. That is certainly one way to try and mitigate the influence. But what I'm trying to point out to you, certainly within the UK and possibly even in America, the state education now is so pernicious and so dogmatic and so determined to push a certain narrative and so intolerant of anyone who disagrees that you send your kids into those places, and even if they had classes outside that told them something different, it'd be like harming your children, because you'd be sending them into this toxic environment where their opinions are not welcome, supported, or validated, but simply villainized and hated. And it's the prejudice of the progressives that lie at the heart of that, Boy Plus. So that's why I think your solution isn't actually a solution. Certainly not in the UK. I don't know if maybe it's different in Nigeria. Paul, what do you want to say before I open it up to everybody?
Hey there, Rob. Bob. I just wanted to say that I'm a homeschooler, previous homeschooler from America, and I wholeheartedly agree that Christian parents, if they're able to, should remove their children from a public school setting. the supporting scripture that I'll use for that is train up your child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. I think if a parent is able to, a homeschooling setting is ideal for a child to attain a Christian background. And I will point towards public schools as being harmful for children, in that I believe that the state has is fundamentally disincentivized from removing themselves from power, which they are incentivized to keep themselves in power. So how can children be expected to get a fair education from an entity that is incentivized to keep themselves in power? Those are my points.
I clicked the wrong. I was trying to click on the invite link to share it for people, but I clicked leave by accident, so I didn't get everything that you said. But essentially, you're kind of on the same page as me. One point that I would want to point out is that not every parent can. And
It's
so
true.
it seems that the Christian response to this is going to be varied from family to family, network to network, fellowship to fellowship. And if anything, this strengthens again the reason why we need the Benedict option of Christians coalescing geographically into geographical areas. So I just want to open it up now to free discussion. Everyone's had at least one say. So now unmute your mics, guys. And if you've got anything additional you want to say, now's the time. I'll just manage it.
Yeah, so I do agree with Bob and Paul that Christians should morally and as a duty not have the state educating their child. I think as a Christian principle anyway, of that kind of self-sustaining, virtue that you don't put weight onto other people as not. So I think even just within the Christian philosophy, it's a given. You don't have the state, but of course. So that's where I was going. That's why I thought, if you've got 20% of children being educated by the state for reasons that they can't do it, being it charity or, the service, so teachers, policemen, nurses, doctors, blah, 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 the bonus, not of money or power, is just that, you get a bit back from your own society for the service you do, because you're probably doing a job where bringing up your child isn't, getting all the Christians into the civil service was a mission statement you said, wasn't it, Bob?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think in terms of us, until we've reached a point that we are the ones influencing, until we've reached the point that we have taken away this kind of pernicious ideology that's operating within the state, and that has to come from a rejection of current conservatism or current republicanism if you're in America. Because conservatism in the UK, republicanism in America is simply the party of no. They don't see themselves as having a proactive agenda. They see themselves as simply holding back the agenda of others. And that's the wrong way to win. You need to have a vision of civilization if you want to influence. Whereas conservatism and republicanism at the moment is simply, well, we just want to cut off the fat of the progressive ideology, and we want to cut off the fat of the progressive vision of the world. That's one of the reasons why Trump was so unique, is because even though in his muddled up thinking and incoherent worldview, there were a few places where he definitely had a different vision and was willing to push it forward, and that's what makes him so amazing. But yeah, so there's my thoughts. Anyone else?
Well, I was actually going to say, like, there definitely is a stigma when it comes to state education, and that cannot be ignored. Like, saying that, it's easy to say, like, oh yeah, we need to get our kids out of school, but it's not going to happen. Right? In a sense, it's going to be pushed back by the stigma of culture. In a sense, people are going to be told that, oh, they don't go to school, then there's a problem with them. And obviously, we've seen this in the parks with truancy officers and stuff like that. I'm not saying they didn't support people having homeschooling, but I'm saying in a sense, when it comes to curriculum, the capitalist state and their religion, they want to enforce it onto anybody they can, including Christians in a sense. So I don't think there is an easy answer that you can just say that, oh, take them out of school, it'll be fine. I don't think that's quite simple. I think it'll be very hard to, in a sense. But I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'll be very hard to. Go on.
Yeah, I think Bloodfire. The thing is that once the progressives get wind of the fact that Christians are removing their children from state education as a way of ensuring that Christians are brought up with Christian values, doctrines, and a worldview, it won't be long after that before progressives make the move of outlawing homeschooling. This is the point that we Christians need to recognize, is that the church, the Christian world, is on a collision course with the liberal state. And this is why we should uncouple ourselves from any forms of nationalism, and we should build our identity solely and completely upon Christ, rather than the historical paradigm that we've inherited, which is that, these are our lands and these are our institutions. They're not anymore. And there's no foreseeable future where they will be again, certainly within our lifetime. We've got to lay the foundation of allowing the next generation to move that bit closer to re-Christianizing the West. Any other points?
Yeah, Bob. In my last year of primary school, I went to all Christian school. Most of my primary schools were Christian schools. I still remember my Kumbaya. Funny enough, yeah.
I'd like to hear a rendition of Kumbaya by Mr. Brown. That'd be quite funny.
Kumbaya, my lord. Come on, the song is just very addictive. It stays in your head. Yeah?
Go on.
But yeah, I think something went wrong down the line, because I, as a Muslim, should have not gone to all Christian school. And I think that's where they went wrong. They should have only allowed, I know it sounds wrong, but they should have only allowed Christians to go into Christian schools. Like the Jews only allowed Jewish people to go into their schools, like in Stamford Hill. And we, as Muslims, have Muslim schools as well, and we have to pay for those private schools, but we don't really have a state-funded religious school. But I think UK should have that for Christians. If they choose not to have their children going to a state school being taught by the state, they should have that ability to send them to all Christian school funded by the taxpayers, because most of the taxpayers, if not, are Christian themselves. So there should be something there for Christians as well. I think that's where it went wrong.
Yeah, I just want to reply to that. Christians believe that out of our abundance we should bless our neighbors. So the idea that we would exclude Muslims from a Christian school is counterintuitive to the Christian. We certainly wouldn't want a Muslim majority at a Christian school for the same reason that we wouldn't want a liberal progressive majority at a Christian school, because then you're diluting your Christian identity. But out of our abundance, we believe in blessing our neighbors. And Christianity. Wait 1 second, Mr. Brown. And Christians have been at the heart, actually, of pushing education in the Muslim world, particularly education for women. Which is something that gets neglected in a lot of traditional Muslim societies. But coming back to the question of state education here, like, the thing is, you set up a Christian school, then the state sets out the national curriculum. As Christians, we then have to massage that curriculum or work around that curriculum so that we can still give a Christian child a Christian education, even though the state is telling us to teach the child something else. And a lot of, for instance, the false ecumenism that was talked about by Bloodfire, that is pushed by political concerns. The idea is that the politicians, the village elites, don't want a conflict in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, which is all the ingredients of a civil war. And so they instead push this narrative that all religions are the same. So therefore, you've got nothing to fight about. Therefore, you've got nothing to get angry about. You've got no differences. We're all the same. We're all the same. And that's the reason why they push the false ecumenism. Anyone else want to come in?
I would disagree a little bit, Bob, because if we flip that,
Go on, Mr. Brown. I'll let you speak, and then
yeah.
Paul.
If we flip it, let's say in East London, you have a majority will be Asian. You can say arguably the majority will be Muslim. Could you imagine that state-funded school, whatever, pushing for Islamic teaching and then forcing the students to sit in those classes? It would be, for educational purposes, you have your religious studies, but to be taught as a mandatory teaching, I think is wrong. Just like the same way for me, it was forced upon for me to learn these things, but when I went there, not all of it was laid out, and like it was in the 80s, where they forced me to go to these things and sing the Kumbaya, and forced me to. If I didn't sing, they'll give me a detention, so they'll look at my mouth to see if I'm singing. Them sort of things. Those little things I think were wrong. There should be some sort of leniency towards it. But
okay.
Yeah.
Paul, you wanted to come in, and then I think Rob wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if Christian parents have to, for whatever reason, have their children in a public school setting, that they should by no means leave their children's education completely to the public setting. There should be a proactive encouragement in the faith, teaching, just some sort of additional support network beyond that, because when you send a child to a public education system, their views inevitably conform closer to that system, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the process of socialization that we go through. Every TV program that we watch, every radio program that we listen to, every radio song that we listen to, every institution that we pass through that sends us on those educational training programs where they teach us about the company, all of those interactions socialize us. They influence our perceptions, our prejudices, our judgments, our value system, how we ascribe value to different things. And Christians are not aware of how they are being influenced by surrounding society. And because we are like butter spread over too little butter spread over too much toast, or too little salt spread into too much water, we don't have enough counter voices and enough internal peer pressure to readily resist this kind of pressure that we're encountering. And what we know is that when you stand up to progressives, they back down. Progressives are cowards. But they are not cowards if they outnumber you. That's why you need the Benedict option. I'm sorry, this is not an advert for the Benedict option, but it definitely seems to be part of the solution. Rob, did you want to say something?
I probably have to know more about the Benedict option, but in ignorance of all that. Yeah, so this seems to be it's to disempower the state system. I think if it was the fact that we need to change the law, right? So we need to give parents sovereignty over their child, which obviously includes their education. So the state cannot punish you for not putting your child through formal education. So that would be something that would have to be pushed towards. And then the second one, it is just going to be how the actual church organizes it, right? So you actually get the number of Christians together, number of churches, physical, otherwise, digital, whatever. So you're actually working with a reality. These are the numbers. This is the value. First, you need the freedom to do it. It would probably explode. You'd probably have loads of people just wanting their child in a Christian church that was at least liberalized or open to the English culture as a whole, what we have to work with, not, just the exceptional ideal being made. But that will happen. It'll probably be private. It'll probably be more expensive. So what we're really talking about is what you're saying is we need to give that sovereignty back over to the parent. It'll be the same for Mr. Brown and his kids. He won't have the option of having Islam supported or not in a state school, but if he can fork out the money, or the Ummah, the community, raises monies, who are we to say what they do with their children, how they educate them? It has to be fair. They're only a small percentage you know, with
So-
everything else taken into account, you know, we have to give them the freedom to do that.
So let me
just be
let me just
brilliant
come in.
in.
Let me just come in. The thing is, we're speaking pretty much. The Christian community needs to see itself more as surviving what comes after liberal progressive thought has collapsed into its own internal contradictions, because that is what is happening. Progressive, you know, as the progressive agenda is pushed progressively, it goes further and further over a cliff into the absolutely preposterous, which is the kind of things that we're seeing now. And that's why you've got feminists now fighting against transgenderists, because the internal contradictions of progressive thinking are now developing their fruits. So you've got the progressive left eating the left, you know, because it's a cancerous way of thinking. It's like a tumor. And we as Christians, we need to consolidate our sense of identity as a way of progressing. I think, Rob, that you've got to understand that, and please understand that I'm not trying to suggest solutions for the state. I'm just trying to think about what the Christian church needs to do for its own good. And you've suggested one model of that, which is that Christian churches in a local area set up their own little school for the Christian children of those fellowships. And I think that's a really good model, actually. You know, if Christian fellowships in a certain geographical area, say, let's just use one example in London. So Acton. If all the churches in Acton decided, right, we're going to set up a school, and all the kids and the youth that come to our fellowships will go to that school and we'll educate them, that is a really good way forward, especially if that can be done in such a way that it helps poor Christian families that couldn't pay for it as private education. Now, what Muslims do, to be honest, is not my concern. We need to be thinking about what we do. You know, we've already talked about what we do in relation to Islam. Now we're talking about what as Christians we do in relation to others. The sort of we mustn't expect that if we Christians, we might come at it with a thing of, well, what's fair for us is fair for Muslims. I guarantee jihadists and Islamists are not thinking that way. They're not thinking of reciprocation. They're thinking of advantage and dominance, and we should always be alive to that. Go on. Yeah, anyone else want to come in? Bloodfire, you haven't said anything. Mr. Brown, you haven't said anything.
I'll just quickly say, like, I would like a system like it was back in, like, or pre-Enlightenment, but like before at the time of Aquinas or like Calvin, like stuff like that, where basically like there was just an education system for Christians and solely for Christians that they could learn and study their religion on all bases really, and they weren't limited in a sense, and it was more and Christians were fostering this kind of adoration for like scriptural arts and stuff like that. It wasn't just reliant solely on the state and their opinions, in a sense. I don't think there is a quick fix solution. I don't think there is a solution for us to just adopt today. Well, I think if we had more funding, and then if the state were actually we're interested in helping out people of other faiths, then they would actually put more funding into building these academic schools for essentially Christians to be able to study at. I think it's important that Christians have that as a haven away from the false schools anyway. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so I just want to come back on this. Sorry, guys, I'm going to start wrapping this up now. So, Mr. Brown, if you wanted to say something, I do apologise. In terms of the point of education from a Christian, the point of education is to bring someone to the knowledge and the enjoyment of God and their place in the world and their place within the church. State education doesn't do that. But that should certainly be a point of education. It should be about the cultivation of the soul not simply about head knowledge. And that's why in some Christian homeschooling networks, they teach the children Latin. I know of a family who are sending their children to a Christian homeschooling network, and you've got these little kids learning Latin, which is connecting them so much to their historical roots within, you know, the European tradition. And one of the things that is stopping us from being more effective in all of this is the Sunday Club Church. The idea that your fellowship is the church, and that you belong to that little network, that little Sunday club, and that prevents us from working together in areas where we really should be working together. And this is one of those areas where Christians really should be working together, because the future of all our children depend upon it, rather than sending one or two Christian kids to a school in which they're surrounded by non-Christians, in which they feel awkward and they feel that they should be shy about their faith because people might bully them or laugh at them. Why not send all our Christian kids to a single school where they feel like the majority, where they encourage one another, where they embolden one another, and where they are the majority, into which people like Mr. Brown can send his Muslim children, and then those Christian children may evangelize the Muslim children or the atheist children or the progressive children that are the minority amongst them. This is the reason why we need a culture. So I want to thank everyone for your contributions. Please be polite and remove yourself from the chat. As I'm bringing this to a close, I don't want to have to kick you out. Thank you very much. So, guys, I just want to let you know, please, if you like the content. In fact, actually, guys, for the 100 of you that are still watching, can you put 1 if you like this format, or 2 if you would like me to go back to the question and answer format that I used to do? So 1 if you prefer me to continue using this format, and 2 if you prefer the idea of the question and answer format that I used to do. I'll just let that come through. Whilst that is coming through, I'll find my psalm. Please put a number, guys. It's easier to read. What's 3, Piers Taylor, you muppet? What's 3? Is that none of the above? Does it mean neither? It's a binary option. You just lost your vote, mate. Okay, so there seems to be some people who definitely prefer the Q&A, but the majority seem to be in favour of the current format. So I'll keep using the current format, but maybe once in a blue moon I'll do a Q&A just to mix it up for all of you twos out there, and all of those people you that are happy with both. Okay, guys. So if you could please like this video, share this video, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Like, we're storming towards 9,000, but be honest, I helped to build Soko Films, and Soko Films is on 50,000. So it would be nice if I could get anything back to that. The reason why I'm not going to the corner is because there is no corner at the moment. The UK is still in a heavy lockdown, and there's no point being a martyr over nothing, really, especially when I can still be active without any interference. So yeah, if you are interested, you can support me on Patreon, or you can support me via my blog, both of which will appear in the description box. I am shutting down PayPal, just to let you know, guys. So if you have in the past supported me via PayPal and you wish to continue to do so, please do it through the blog. It essentially works just like PayPal. There's no difference. And yeah, it works exactly like PayPal, but I've moved away from PayPal. Okay, guys. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless you all. Let us end in a prayer. God, hear my cry. Listen to my prayer. From the end of the earth, I call to you with fainting heart. Lead me to the high rock that stands far out of my reach. For you are my refuge, a strong tower against the enemy. Let me stay in your tent forever, taking refuge in the shelter of your wings. For you, God, accept my vows. You grant me the heritage of those who fear your name. Let the king live on and on. Let his years continue, age after age. May his throne be always in God's presence. Your faithful love and constancy watch over him. Then I shall always sing to your name, day after day, fulfilling my vows. God bless you guys. Good night, and peace be with you all. Take care.